Hey, Run Life Wellness here. Thank you so much for watching today. So, I want to talk today a little bit about something that might not sound exciting at first, but I'm telling you, this quietly determines the direction of our whole lives. And it is the idea of mastering the mundane. What do I mean by that? So, most people just assume that big life changes comes from big moments, big decisions, big breakthroughs, dramatic turning points. But in reality, the habits and the disciplines that shape our lives usually look very ordinary. They're very easy to do. The results are invisible at first. They seem insignificant. And because of these three characteristics, people tend to overlook them very easily. So let's start with the first one. Okay, many of these habits that we're going to be talking about that would improve our lives, they're actually quite easy to do. Drinking more water is easy. Going for a 20-minute walk, easy. Eating some vegetables with your meals, easy. Reading a few pages of a good book, easy. Spending a few minutes maybe in prayer or meditating, sounds easy. None of these are super complicated. They don't require a special talent. They don't even require a huge investment of time. But here's the paradox. Okay, what's easy to do is also easy not to do. Because these actions for these habits, because they're small, skipping it actually feels harmless. You tell yourself, oh, you'll do it tomorrow, or maybe next week, or when life slows down, gives you a moment. And nothing dramatic happens when you miss it once, right? When small positive actions are skipped repeatedly, then life slowly drifts in a different direction. So the second reason that these habits can get ignored is because the results are invisible at first. That's the key point to remember. Think about nutrition just for a moment, okay? So if someone eats poorly today, it most likely is not going to ruin their health tonight, for the most part, right? Nothing dramatic is happening immediately. But that is part of why people keep making the choices that they're making. And the reverse is also true. If you eat a nourishing meal today, your body isn't gonna suddenly transform tomorrow either, right? Health doesn't necessarily just come from one single meal, but it does come from patterns repeated. Okay, so the same thing can happen with movement, right? One single workout isn't going to magically change your body, but consistent movement over months and years changes strength, energy, your metabolism, and resilience. And learning actually works the same way too. If you read 10 pages of a good book today, is it going to change your life tonight? Probably not. If you skip those 10 pages, your life won't fall apart tomorrow either. But read 10 pages every day for a year, and suddenly you've absorbed thousands of pages of ideas, of insight, of wisdom, right? Your thinking begins to change. Your perspective expands. That quiet accumulation is super powerful. And this principle applies even spiritually as well. When you're spending time with God, right? Praying, meditating, worshiping, right? Those spiritual practices, they often feel small in the moment, but spiritual strength grows the same way that muscles grow or that knowledge grows, through consistent repetition over time. That's the key. And there is another interesting dynamic here, okay? By the time people even notice the results of disciplined habits, the work that actually produced them happened a long time before, right? When someone becomes physically strong, right? Those workouts that helped build that strength happened months earlier, right? When someone develops wisdom, right? The books that they read that helped inspire that wisdom may have been read years earlier. When someone walks in spiritual maturity, that quiet prayer life that shaped them was built long before anyone ever saw the fruit, right? So the seeds are planted long before the harvest appears. And that actually leads us to the third characteristic, right? These habits that we're talking about, they're often ignored because they seem insignificant, right? A few minutes of prayer doesn't feel super dramatic, doesn't feel like it would accomplish anything, right? Choosing vegetables instead of a processed food at the moment doesn't feel life-changing. That's why you don't choose that. Taking a walk instead of sitting down, again, doesn't seem like a major decision. Reading a few pages of a book doesn't feel like a super dynamic turning point. But the key is over time, these small actions accumulate, kind of like compound interest, right? They shape our health. They shape our thinking. They shape even our spiritual lives. Tiny disciplines repeated daily is the key, eventually become the structure of our lives. Now, here's where something really important comes in, okay? So one of the most that I have found, most effective strategies that the enemy uses isn't a big temptation. Often it's little distractions that even might seem good. If we stay busy enough or overwhelmed enough, mentally scattered enough, the small disciplines that keep our lives strong slowly disappear. Movement gets replaced with sitting. Nourishing food, right, gets replaced with just convenience food. What's quick? What can be microwaved or ripped up, a package ripped open? Reading gets replaced with scrolling. And prayer gets replaced with a lot of noise. So nothing catastrophic happens the day we skip those things. That's why it's so subtle, right? But days turn into weeks, weeks become months, and before we even realize, an entire year has passed. Without the habits that actually strengthen our lives, that can bring the answers into our lives. It reminds me of the story when Peter walked on the water toward Jesus, right? As long as his focus stayed on Jesus, he did the impossible. We're not made to walk on water, right? When his eyes were on Jesus, he did it. But when his attention shifted to the wind and the waves, fear took over and he began to sink. The storm didn't suddenly change, but his focus did. And something similar happens to us. When the noise of life, the circumstances, the wind and the waves constantly pulls our attention away from the small disciplines that keep us grounded. So learning to master the mundane means deciding that those ordinary habits of daily life actually matter. You have to choose that they matter. Choosing real food, or moving your body, or learning something new every day, spending time with God every day intentionally, guarding your thoughts, encouraging others. Whatever the action is, none of these actions look dramatic in the moment, but over time, they build something powerful. They build health, wisdom, strength, clarity, spiritual stability. The truth is, most of the transformation that people want or see even in others didn't happen in them overnight either. It was built quietly through thousands of small decisions that seemed ordinary at the time. Nothing special. So don't underestimate the mundane, those daily choices that you make, even when you don't feel like it. Those small disciplines no one is applauding. They are quietly shaping the person that you're becoming.